Kotlin is the most popular programming language for building Android apps, and it can also do a lot of other things. In this beginner's course, Alex will teach you Kotlin from the ground up. Alex is an experienced developer who has created multiple Android apps.
In this course, I will cover everything you need to know in order to be able to create your programs or move to build apps on Android. I will start from zero by downloading the software that we need to write code to creating our first program, and then we're going to move to more advanced topics. We'll cover things like variables, operators, loops, arrays, object-oriented programming, generics, lambda functions, coroutines. Everything will be covered in depth with great detail. Additionally, I use beautiful animation while talking about a concept. For who is this course? This course is for complete beginners who have no experience with programming and also for experienced programmers. Kotlin is perfect for beginners because it's very intuitive and concise. And if you already have a background in other programming languages, then this course will be easy for you. So let's get started. Now it's time to download and install an IDE, and throughout this course I'm going to use an IDE called IntelliJ IDE, which is an IDE made by a company called JetBrains. Now you may be wondering, what is an IDE? An IDE stands for an Integrated Development Environment, and it's basically the tool that you're going to use to write a code in. And IntelliJ IDE is like a text editor, but a very sophisticated one because it has a lot of features like highlighting our code, showing real-time errors and suggestions. You can run and compile your code just by a few clicks. In other words, it's making the process of writing code easier and better. Therefore, let's download IntelliJ IDE. So I'm going to open my browser, and in the search bar we type IntelliJ IDE, press enter, and we click on this download link. And on the downloading page you're going to see two options: Ultimate, which is paid, so you need to pay in order to download it, and Community, which is free. And the difference is that the Ultimate has more features and Community has less features, but Community is enough for our purposes. Also, pay attention on the left hand side. When I'm currently recording this video, the latest version is 2021.1.2, which was released on the 1st June of 2022. And if you look at the system requirements here, if you click on that, you will see that this IntelliJ IDE only works for a 64-bit version of Windows. So if you have a 32-bit version of Windows, this will not work for you. Now, if you have macOS or Linux, you should download the particular version for your system. And if you don't know how, just tell me in the comments and I will make two separate videos and I'll show you how to do. Now, I'm going to download the community version for Windows. So click to download the community. Now our downloading is starting on the right hand side on the top. And if you have a different browser, you will see this in a different place. So once the downloading is finished, just open this file. I'm going to close the browser now because I don't need the browser, and the installation will start immediately. Now it's asking us if you allow this app to make changes to our device. Click yes. Here we need to click on next. This is the folder location where IntelliJ IDE is going to be installed. You can keep the default location or you can change it if you want. I'm going to keep the default location, so I'm going to click on next. And here I'm going to check this box to have a desktop shortcut. I'm going to click on next. Now I'm going to click on install, and IntelliJ IDE is going to be installed on my computer. As you can see on the left hand side, IntelliJ already appeared. Now let's wait until the installation finishes. When the installation finishes, just check this Run IntelliJ IDE Community Edition and click on Finish. Now IntelliJ IDE is going to open. Now it's asking us if you want to import IntelliJ settings. So if you have the previous version of IntelliJ IDE, you can import the settings here. But I'm going to click Do Not Import Settings and click on OK. Now IntelliJ IDE is going to open. And this is the welcome window of IntelliJ IDE. And here on the left hand side, click on Customize. Go here where it says Color Theme. So you can change this theme because the default theme is this dark theme. I'm going to change it to light because the IntelliJ Light theme is better for tutorials, but you can keep the dark theme if you want. And in a separate video I'm going to show you how to add more themes, not just the ones provided by IntelliJ IDE. Now click back on projects, click on this plus button where it says new project, because we need to configure the JDK now. And now here we have JDK, and we have in red in angle brackets we have no SDK. And now here we need to add the JDK, and JDK stands for Java Development Kit, SDK stands for Software Development Kit. So Software development kit is the Java development kit, no matter how you call it. This thing contains the tools that IntelliJ IDE needs in order to be able to compile and run our programs, because without them IntelliJ IDE it's like an empty text editor. So it needs those tools in order to be able to work with our particular programming language, which is Kotlin. Now, to download the JDK, and we use Java Development Kit because Kotlin and Java are interoperable, and that means that we can use the existing tools and library which Java already has in our Kotlin project. So we click here on this No SDK and click here where it says Download JDK. Now, on this window, we select version 17, not version 18, because this is the latest version 18. We choose version 17 because this is the version which has the long-term support. And that means that it will receive bug fixes and updates for several years to come without you needing to switch to a new version when that new version is released. For the vendor, we choose Amazon Corrector, and I'm going to let the default location. So I'm going to click download to download the JDK. Now the JDK is going to be downloaded. Now the JDK has been installed and is installed on our IntelliJ IDE, and now we can create our projects. But I'm not going to create a project, so I'm not going to click on create. I'm going to click on cancel, and in the next video we're going to create our first project. And we're also going to talk about a little bit the JDK and the JVM. So see you in the next video. Now it's time to create our first project, and there is a tradition in programming that our first program should be to output the text hello world to the console, and this is what we're going to do in this video. Therefore, I'm going to open IntelliJ IDE. You should open your IntelliJ IDE. On the left hand side, make sure to have project selected, then click on this plus button to create a new project. And here we have a few options. The first is the name, and here we need to name our project. We need to give a name to our project, and the name of the project should start with a capital letter, and if it has multiple words, every word should start with a capital letter. So I'm gonna call this and this way of naming is called the Pascal case. So I'm gonna call this this project hello world, and also you should not have white spaces in your name. Next, we have the location, and this is where the project is going to be created. You can change this location if you want, but I'm going to keep the default location. Next, we have language, and here you need to select the language on which this project is going to be created. So we select Kotlin. If Java is selected, just select Kotlin. For the build system, we select IntelliJ, and next we have the JDK, the Java Development Kit. And if for whatever reason it says here in angle brackets no JDK, just click on that and go down here down of two options. It should say detected as JDKs, and you will see the JDK down there. You're gonna see Amazon Corrector version 17. Just click on that and it's gonna be added here. Next we have this add sample code, and what this is gonna do, as the name implies, is gonna generate some code for us, but I don't want to have that code generated now, because I want to type that code myself, and I want to explain that code, and in the next video we're gonna check that to generate the code for us. So I'm gonna click on create now to create the project. And here you have the tips. You can keep the tips activated because it's useful information, but I'm gonna check this. Actually, I'm gonna just close it. Here we have those windows which says there is a plugin update installed. I'm gonna close this. So what we have now on the left hand side is called the project pane, and here we have some folders which IntelliJ IDE generated for us. But now I want to show you how to check for IntelliJ updates, because in this way we'll have the latest features throughout this course. And to check for IntelliJ updates, you go to help and you go down here where it says check for updates, and here you can check for IntelliJ updates, and you'll see a window down here, and if there is an update, it's gonna say that there is an update and you can install that update. But now it's saying that you already have the latest version of IntelliJ IDE and plugins installed because we have the latest updates. But it's good to check for this, because in this way we'll have the latest updates throughout this course. Next, check if you want to check for Kotlin updates. So for the programming language Kotlin, you go to Tools, Kotlin, and go here it says Configure Kotlin plugin updates. And if there is a new update, you'll see it here, and you click on install, and that update is gonna be installed on IntelliJ IDE. So there is no update because we have the latest updates. I'm gonna click on OK. Now let's focus on the left hand side, and if you see something like this and you don't see this in this expanded form, just click on this greater sign in front of SRC. SRC stands for source. This is where our source code is gonna go. Then click on this greater sign in front of main and make sure to have the folder Kotlin selected. On this folder Kotlin, this is where we're gonna add our code, but first we need to create a file, and the file is the thing where we're gonna put our code. So we right click on this, go to new, and here we select on the right hand side, we select Kotlin class file. Now we need to give a name to our file, and I'm gonna call this file main. You'll see the reason for this later. So I'm gonna call this file main. The name also should be in Pascal case, so it should start with a capital letter, and if it has multiple words, every word should start with a capital letter. And for from these options that we have here, we select file, because we're gonna create, as I said, the file. Now press enter. Now the file was created for us, as you can see in the folder Kotlin. Now we have main.kt, we have the file, and also it opened the file for us. Let's click there. Now if you don't have the file opened, and if you have something like this, just double click on the file and the file is going to be opened for you. Now we're going to type some code. Now you need to type exactly what I typed. So type fun. So while I am typing, as you can see, IntelliJ is trying to help us and is giving us some suggestions. So he's saying, do you mean fun? That and if you want to fill in that for you, just press enter, because I want to type that fun keyword. Fun, and it also added the space. So fun space, then you type main, and next you need to put parentheses, and as you can see, this play button now appeared. I'm gonna explain immediately why. And we put the left parenthesis, and when we put the left parenthesis, the right parenthesis is gonna be added automatically. So we put the left parenthesis and the right parenthesis was added automatically. Then we get outside of the parentheses, we press space. Now I'm gonna add curly braces, and again we put the left curly brace and the right curly brace is gonna be added automatically because IntelliJ is helping us. Now we're inside the curly braces, and now we press enter, and it added the curly brace on the third line and also indented this line for us. Now let's talk about what we have here. Now what we have here is what is called the main function. And the main function is the entry point of our program. So every program that you create, it first needs this entry point in order to be able to compile your code. But let's take each part of this main function individually to talk about. So first we have this fun, and fun is the keyword for creating a function. And you can use fun keyword to create your own functions, but we're gonna see that in future videos. Next we have main, and main is the name of this function. Functions can have different names, but main is a special one, as I said, because main is the entry point of our program. Every program that you create needs a main function in order to be able to run your code. And in fact, if I change the name of this function to fun main, let's say A, the play button immediately disappears, because now we don't have an entry point and our program can't run. So this is a special function, and functions can have different names, as I said, and as you'll see when you're gonna create your own functions, that you can create, you can give different names to your functions. Now, next we have parentheses, and we have parentheses because functions can take parameters and can do some work with those parameters, but our function doesn't take any parameter. But we still need to provide the parentheses because they are part of the syntax. And you can think of the syntax like the grammar rules that you need to respect in a specific language in order to be understood. And in the same way, this is the syntax in the programming sense. It's like the grammar rules in which the compiler, as you will see what is the compiler later, the compiler enforces you to respect those syntactical rules, which is to have parentheses for a function, in order to be able to understand your code. Because if I delete the parentheses here, now we have an underline which says expecting parentheses. So it's you need to respect the syntactical rules in order for your code to be understood. Next, we have curly braces, and we have left curly brace and right curly brace, and this is called the body of the function. So this is where our code goes. So this is also called the code block, because it's the block of code. This is where our logic, our lines of code go. We define them inside the curly braces. So this represents the body of the function. And let's add some code. And I'm gonna type print line here. So because we need to output something in the console. So we type here print line. So we type print, and while I'm typing, you should see a suggestion, and we have the suggestion print line, and we select the first one to fill in for us. And now we go inside the parentheses of the print line, and we put double quotation marks. And inside the double quotation marks, we type hello world. Now we need to run this code, and in order to run this code, to compile this code, we can do it in two ways. First, you can click on this play button that we have here, or you can right click and you can go here where it says run main.kt, and the code is gonna be compiled. And let's do it from here first. So I'm gonna click on this play button to run our code, and I'm gonna see the console opening down, and you're gonna see the text hello world outputted. So the console opened, and we have hello world. We have the text that we type inside this thing that we have here. This is also a function, and we have this code outputted now in the console opened. Now I'm gonna close the console to explain what this print line is. This print line that we have here is a function also, but it's a function which takes some which takes input, and the input is this text. And this function, its job is to take whatever you pass as the input and to output that in the console. So this is what this print line is doing, and this is a function that we didn't create. We didn't type fun print line and then we call it. This is a function which is built into Kotlin. This is a function which is already built by the Kotlin programmers. So we just call that function inside our code, and you can use it. You don't need to create this function. So this is what this print line is doing. So it's taking whatever you pass inside the parentheses, and it's outputting that in the console. So this is our discussion about the first program, which is to output some text in the console, hello world. And now I'm gonna show you that. Now I'm gonna show you an illustration to understand what is the JDK, the JVM, and how Kotlin and Java achieves this interoperability, because Kotlin and Java are fully interoperable, and that means that you can have a Java project to which you can add Kotlin code, and you can compile that code, and everything will work fine. And also I'm going to explain what the word compile means. And for that, I'm going to bring an illustration here. So this is the illustration, and let's talk about what we have here. First, we have Kotlin source code, and Kotlin source code is the code that we wrote, is this code that is meant to be human readable. So this code is the code that we as humans can understand. We can write this code, we can read this code, but the computer doesn't understand this high level code that we wrote. It needs something, it needs machine code, it needs binary code in order to be able to understand. And this is where the JDK comes into action. So our Kotlin source code, again, this code, which is meant to be human readable, then when we press on that play button when you press on that play button on this button and the code is compiled, what happens under the hood is that Kotlin source code is taken by the Java Development Kit, the JDK, and through the Kotlin compiler. So the Kotlin compiler acts like a translator. It takes that high-level human readable and writable code. It converts that code then into what is called Java bytecode. And this is not the final step, as you can see in this illustration. This is just the intermediary step. This is not converted into machine code. Then this Java bytecode, it's taken by the JVM, so it's sent to the JVM, and the JVM then takes that Java bytecode and converts that Java bytecode into something which a specific machine can understand. But let's first explain why Kotlin, why the JDK takes this Kotlin source code and then it converts this Kotlin source code into Java bytecode. And this is doing this because different processors and different operating systems need different instructions in order to understand your code. So if we will not have this Java bytecode, so if we will compile our code on a specific platform, that code can run only on that specific platform. But because our Kotlin source code is taken by the JDK and through the Kotlin compiler and is converted into Java bytecode, and the Java bytecode then it's send it to the JVM, and JVM stands for Java Virtual Machine. And the JVM then, because different platforms and different different platforms and different processors need different instructions, the JVM is the one which is doing the hard work of figuring out what kind of instruction that specific platform needs. So it converts that Java bytecode into machine code, let's say, which a Windows platform can understand. Then the same thing happens to Linux. The JVM receives the same Java bytecode, and then it converts that Java bytecode into machine code, which a Linux platform can understand. And then it's doing the same thing to a macOS. So the macOS the JVM is gonna receive the same Java bytecode, and it's gonna convert that Java bytecode into machine code which macOS can understand. So this is how Kotlin and Java can achieve this thing called write once and run everywhere. This is because the work of converting that machine code which a specific platform can understand has shifted from the programmer to the platform which implements that JVM. So we just wrote our code, we run our code through the JDK. The JDK converted that code in Java bytecode, and then the platform which has the JVM installed, it's doing the work of converting that Java bytecode that we wrote into something which that specific platform can understand. So, and this is why Java and Kotlin are fully interoperable. So you can add Java code to an existing Kotlin program, and vice versa. You can add Kotlin code to an existing Java program, and that is possible because the JDK is gonna convert through the compiler all of that code into the same Java bytecode, and then that code is gonna be run on the JVM, and the JVM is gonna convert that into machine code, and that code is gonna run on a specific platform. So this is how Java and Kotlin, and this is why Java and Kotlin are fully interoperable, because they are ultimately converted into the same Java bytecode, and you can also achieve this write once, run everywhere, because that code then runs on the JVM, Java Virtual Machine, which is doing the hard work of figuring out what kind of instructions specific platform needs in order to understand that code that we wrote. And in this way, that hard working has shifted from us to the people who implement the JVM. So this is how the JDK and the JVM works under the hood. And if you find this confusing, don't be. This is just a relaxed discussion about how the JDK, what is the JDK, and what is the Kotlin compiler. Because I said our Kotlin, I said previously that our code is compiled. When I said that, this is actually what was happening. Our code was taken by the JDK, and through the JDK was converted to Java bytecode. Then it was sent to the JVM of which is on my Windows, and then that is converted into machine code, and then we see in the output hello world. So this is our discussion about the first program, how to create the first program hello world, and this is the additional discussion about how the JDK, how the Kotlin compiler, and how the JVM works. So see you in the next video. So in the previous video we created our first program, and even though it was a simple program, you should celebrate because you created your first program. But if you want to make your program to do something useful, you need to store data. And in order to store data, we need to use variables. And this is what we're gonna talk about in this video. Therefore, I'm gonna open IntelliJ IDE. I'm gonna create a new project. So make sure that on the left hand side you have project selected. Click on this plus button to create a new project. I'm gonna call it variables. It should be in Pascal case if it has multiple words. Language, we have already Kotlin selected. For the build system, IntelliJ. And also make sure to have the JDK selected here. And now I'm gonna check this add sample code, because this is gonna generate the code that we typed previously, respectively the main function and the print line and the hello world. Text is gonna be now auto-generated for us because we check this box, add sample code, and it's gonna add the code automatically for us. So I'm gonna click on create. Now our project is ready to go, and as you can see here, it generated some code for us, and this is similar to what we did in the previous video where we created our code ourselves, but we have some additional code, and I'm gonna delete this additional code because it will make things confusing. So I'm gonna delete this part. Sorry, I'm gonna delete this part. And also you may have noticed that here inside this parentheses now we have this args, array, and string. We can delete this too because it will make things confusing, and we're gonna talk about what are arrays and all of that in the next videos. Now I'm gonna alright, now we're ready. Now let's run this code to see what is happening. It's gonna output that text like it did in the previous video. You should open the console in a short moment. And indeed it opened the console and it outputted the text hello world like it did in the previous video. So I'm gonna close the console now. Also, let's expand this src to see the file that it was created automatically for us this time. And let's change this hello world text to print another text. Let's print type your name there. In my case it's Alex. So I'm gonna run this code and it will output my name in the console. Alright, so it outputted hello Alex like we typed here, but it's what we have here is pretty inflexible. A better way to do that it will be to have something to store this name and then refer that thing here, to call that thing here. In this way, it will be a bit more dynamic. And to do that, we need to use variables. And variables are like some containers which can hold data values. And let's see how to create a variable. Okay, let's put the code below above our print ln statement. And if you don't know what a statement is a complete instruction of execution. Now, to create a variable, we just type the keyword var, which stands for variable. Alright. Next, we need to give a name to our variable to be able to refer it later, to call it later. And the naming convention around naming a variable is called camel case. And that means that the first letter in the name, if it has multiple words, should start with a lowercase letter. So I'm gonna type user, and the next word, name, with a capital letter. Alright, next we need to provide the type of the variable. And that means what kind of data this variable is gonna hold, is gonna store. To do that, we need to put colon, and next we need to say what type of data is gonna store, what data is gonna store. And we want to store text, and to store text we need to type here string. And string means that this variable is gonna store a sequence of characters or text. Now, we need to assign a value to this variable, and to do that we put here equals space, and because we explicitly said here that we're gonna put text or string, we put a double pair of quotation marks, and we type Alex. Alright, so now we create our variable, we give it a name, a type, and we've also assigned a value to this variable. Next, we need to refer this variable down here, and to refer that variable, I'm gonna delete this text first. And to refer the variable, we put $, and after the $, we start typing the name of the variable, user. And as I'm typing, the IntelliJ is giving us some suggestions, and it says, do you mean this username variable? And it also has this V here for variable. So I'm gonna press enter to fill in that for me. And if I run this code, you'll see the exact thing happening here. It outputted the text hello Alex, but this time we didn't type the text directly here. We stored that text in a variable, and we call that variable in our println. I'm gonna add a space here to make things more clear. Now, what we can do is to change the value of this variable by adding below of our variable, typing the name of the variable again, user name equals, and now we can assign a new value to this variable. And let's put John here. Right? Let's run this code to see what happens now. Now this time when this instruction is gonna be called, it's gonna print the new value of the variable, which is John. So as you can see down here, it outputted the text hello John. So we can change the value of the variable after we assign a value to it. But what you can't do is to type here username equals 5. And if you hover over here, it says integer literal does not conform to the specific type string. And in other words, it's saying that we said explicitly up here that is gonna store only text, and down here we try to put a whole number, an integer, and that is not gonna work because Kotlin is a language which is called statically typed, and that means that it will check the types of the variable at compile time, not at run time. And that means you cannot run your code if you assign a value to a variable which has a different type than the type that you specified when you declare the variable. This is why we get this warning here. And if I delete this, now let's delete this. All right. Okay. The next type of variable that also, actually not the next type, the next way of declaring a variable is using the keyword val. So if you declare a variable as val means that we cannot change its value after we assign a value to it. So if you try to assign a new value to our variable like we did here, up here, it will not work. So let's actually just change here. Let's put val. Okay, and after I did that, it immediately underline in red username, and it says val cannot be reassigned. And that is because if you declare a variable as val, you cannot change its value later. It will you can put a value to that variable only once, and that's all. You cannot change the value of the variable later. So let's change this back to var to have the ability to change the value. Now let's look at another type of variable. So I'm gonna type var again. I'm gonna call it age. I'm gonna put colon to specify a type here, and now we're gonna use another type, which is int, and int stands for integer or for whole numbers. Now I need to assign a value to it. I'm gonna put I don't know, 10 or I don't know, 20, 22. All right. So what we have now is a different type. Up here we have string, and that means that we're gonna store a sequence of characters, and down here we have integers, and that means that we can store only numbers, only whole numbers. And there are different type of numbers which we're gonna look in the next video. And if I try here to change this first let's actually print this hello Alex. Let's type your age is, and here you put $, and we call the name of the variable. We type the name of the variable age. So we press enter to fill in that for us. And if you run this code, now it says hello John, your age is 22. So it's using the values of this variable in our println, and we can change for the variable also its value, because it's declared as a var, not a val. So we can put here age equals, let's say, 25, and if you run this code, the change is reflected immediately in our code. So now we see hello John, your age is 25. What we can't do, like in the previous example with the username, here we cannot put a string. We cannot put here Alex, because we said explicitly here that this is gonna hold only integers, only whole numbers. So I'm gonna delete this. Let's put it again to 25, and the error disappeared. All right, now let's look at what we have here, because we have these underlines, this great light out of our types, and every time you see something like this, that means that IntelliJ is trying to say something to you. And if you hover over here, actually let's hover over the type. It says explicitly given type. It's redundant here, and that means that it does not need to. We don't need to say explicitly here that is gonna hold sequence of characters. It's gonna hold string because it knows this. It can, because Kotlin has something which is called type inference, and that means that it can infer the type of the variable by the value we assign to it. In our case, we assign some text. So if I delete the type here, now it's still working. And if I, as you can see, if I put here, let's say if I try to put here username equals to 3, it's still treated as a string because it infer the type by the value you assign to it. And similarly, this thing applies to our int type. So if I delete this, it's still working. It's still treating this as an int. So if you try to put here age equals to a text, I don't know, again we have this error in the variable. It says type mismatch, require int and found string, and that means that it's still treating this variable as an int because, as I said, it has something which is called type inference, and it can infer the type of the variable by the value you assign to it. Alright, this is our discussion about variables. There are more types of variables, and we're going to look at that other types in the next videos, and collectively they are called data types. Okay, you can remove this space if you want. So I'm going to end this video now and see you in the next video. So while I was recording this course, JetBrains have released a new version of IntelliJ IDE, and you will see in the course when I create a new project, you will see a different window. It's not that different, it's slightly different than this window, than the window that you will see when you download IntelliJ IDE, which is this version now, which has this window. And when you see this window, here you just need to specify a name. Here you specify the location. For the language, you select Kotlin here. You select for the build system IntelliJ, and you make sure to have the JDK here. And you also check this add sample code, and that is going to generate the main function for you. And you click on create, and the project is going to be created for you. So I thought that it's good to tell you about this, and if you will see this window, and if this window changes in the future, I'm going to release a new video in which I'm going to show you how to, if they change specifically the window of creating a new project, how to create a new project with that window. But for now, this is the window of the latest version. Alright, so in the last video we talked about variables, and we seen there that we can store different data in our variables, and we looked at two different data types, or types in short. And that was the string type and the int type. And the string type was used for storing sequence of characters or text, and the int type was used for storing whole numbers. And in this video we're going to take a deeper look at the integer data type, and we're also going to extend our understanding to more types for storing whole numbers, and that is the byte, the short, and the long data types for storing whole numbers. And you're gonna see what is the difference between these types. Now let's open IntelliJ IDE. I'm gonna open my IntelliJ IDE. On the left side, make sure that project is created, selected. Click on new project. On the left hand side, make sure the Kotlin is selected, and here you need to give a name to our project. Again, it should be in Pascal case. I'm gonna type byte, short, int, and long. Now go down here and it's gonna select IntelliJ, and make sure that the JDK is selected. Click on next to create a new project, and click on finish. Now our project is gonna be created. And down here again is IntelliJ is setting up our project. On the left hand side we have our project pane. I can expand this SRC to see our file, our main file that we created first. Now it was generated for us automatically. I'm gonna delete this code, and here we have something which is called comments, or a comment, but we're gonna look at comments in a separate video. So I'm gonna delete this. Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna add a space here. I'm gonna delete this. You can keep the args there. It is not gonna affect your code in any way, but I want to make it consistent with my previous videos. But you can keep the args there. It will make no difference in the way your code is compiled. Now, let's add the code that we had previously. And previously we had a variable of type string for storing text. Specifically, we store our name there. So I'm gonna type the var keyword because in the last video we established that we want to change this value later. Var, and here we need to give a name to our variable. I'm gonna call it name like in the previous video. For the type, I'm gonna choose string, and I'm gonna put equals, and now it's time to assign a value to it. I'm gonna put again our text. Alright, and down here I'm gonna declare a variable, but this time I'm gonna declare it as a val. I'm gonna type for the name age, and for the type I'm gonna put int for storing the whole numbers. I'm gonna put 22, and we've seen there that we can delete the type here because Kotlin has something which is called type inference, and that means that it can infer the type of the variable by the value we assign to it. So we can delete this type here, and our code is gonna still be valid. And if I hover over here, if you look at here, it's still treating this variable as type of string. So, but in this video, I'm gonna leave the string type. I'm gonna delete this because we're gonna look at the integer more closely. And here, let's change this value. Let's change its name to number, and it's also gonna be an int. And let's take a deeper look. First, let's see what is an integer. We know that it's a whole number, so you can store whole numbers. But what is it has a range. You can put whatever value you want. Actually, there is a range. There is a minimum and maximum value that we can put in an integer data type. So, and to get that minimum and maximum value, we type. I'm gonna put a space here to make the code more clear. I'm gonna type val, and I'm gonna type max integer value, and for the type I'm gonna choose int, or you can let it infer the type. You can, I'm gonna actually put the type here, but you can let it infer the type if you want. Equals, and now we type int dot, and IntelliJ is giving us some suggestions here. I'm gonna choose max value. And this code on the right here is gonna give us, actually the entire code is gonna give us the maximum value in a integer. And if you don't, if this seems confusing, int, dot, and this uppercase, you don't need to worry about that for now. You just need to know that in this way you can get the maximum value to be outputted in our console. And for the minimum value, we're gonna type val min integer value. For the type, I'm gonna choose int. Now I'm gonna type again int dot, and again I'm gonna choose from here min value. Now to print these two values, I'm gonna just delete this text here, and I'm gonna type int integer or int maximum value is, and I'm gonna put $sign to get the value max integer value, right? And below this code, I'm gonna type another println, and here I'm gonna put a pair of quotation marks again, and I'm gonna type int minimum value is $sign. Again, IntelliJ is giving us suggestions. Here I'm going to choose minimum integer value. Now let's print this. Let's output this code to see what is the minimum or maximum value which can be stored in an integer data type. And if you want, you can add a space here to make things more clear. Alright, and as you can see down here when the console opened, that the maximum value is 2,147,000,000 and so on, and the minimum value is 2,147,000,000 and so on, and these are the minimum and maximum values which can be stored in an int. So that means that you cannot put a value which is bigger than this maximum value, or the value which is bigger than the minimum values. And so if you try to assign, and to confirm that, if you try to assign here a value which is bigger than the maximum integer value, so let's type number, and now we maybe spotted the problem here. If I try to put here equals, it says val cannot be reassigned. So let's declare this as a var, because I want to change this value now. I'm gonna put equals, and I'm just gonna copy this. I'm gonna put it here. Now, if I increase this number by 1, let's say that I put 8 here, now it immediately shows an warning. And if I hover over here, it says that the integer literal does not conform to the expected type int. And you may be wondering how this makes any sense, because up here we said explicitly that this variable is going to store integers or whole numbers, and down here we have a whole number. But the problem now is that this whole number is bigger than the maximum integer value which can be stored in an int, which is 2,147,048,347. But now we have a bigger number, and to store this number, we need to use a different data type or a different type. And we're gonna see in the next videos precisely what type we need to use and what type we gonna use for storing a bigger number than the integer maximum value. All right. Also, it's important to know, because it says here now the integer literal. So you may be wondering, what is this literal? The literal is the value that we assign to our variable, and it's called the literal because we assign the value directly here. So we don't have a what is called a symbolic name here, and we're gonna see what is a symbolic name in the next videos. Now I'm gonna edit this video now. I'm gonna change it back to 7, and also you can delete the types here. The code is gonna still work. The code is gonna still be valid. And if you delete the type up here also, because the type can be inferred, like we talked about. Now, I'm gonna end this video now and see you in the next video. Alright, so in the last video we looked at the integer data type, and we saw there that you can store a minimum and a maximum value in an integer. And in this video we're gonna look at the next 3 data types or types for storing whole numbers, and those are the byte, the short, and the long. And let's start with the byte to see what is the minimum and maximum value which can be stored in a byte. So I'm gonna type val my max byte value. For the type I'm gonna choose byte equals byte dot max value. Below I'm gonna type again val. This time I'm gonna call it my min byte value. For the type I'm going to choose byte. I'm gonna put equals. I'm gonna type byte dot min value. And now to print this, to print the value of those variables, I'm gonna copy this to println statements. I'm gonna paste it below here. I'm gonna change the text to byte, and here we need to call our variables. We need to refer our variables. So I'm gonna type my max byte value. Just press enter to fill that for you. And below here I'm gonna type my min byte value. Now let's print these two values to the console to see what is the minimum and maximum value which can be stored in a byte data type. So I'm gonna run this code. Now the console should open in a short moment. Alright, as you can see, the byte maximum value is 127 and the byte minimum value is minus 128. And in contrast with those minimum and maximum values for the integer type, you can see that these two are very, very small compared to that. Now let's look at the next type, which is the short, and I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna type the same code as the same code that you had previously, but so I'm gonna put a space to make it more clear. I'm gonna close the console. So let's see the short type, right? So I'm gonna type val my max short value. I'm gonna put x equals actually let's choose short here for the type, equals short dot max value. All right, I'm gonna press enter. I'm gonna type again val my min short value, and for the type again short, equals short dot min value. Now let's copy this. Actually we have already copied that, so I'm gonna paste that here to print our minimum and maximum values. So I'm gonna change this to short, this text. I'm gonna change it here too. And now we need to call those variables, because as you can see right now they are gray out, and if you hover over it says the variable my max short value is never used, and that's a clever way to see when a variable is used or not. Alright, let's change it. Let's change the name here because we want to refer those variables my max short value, and here we're gonna type my min short value. Right, let's print this to see now what is the minimum and maximum value can be stored in a short. Alright, as you can see down here, it outputted that the short maximum value is minus 32,767, and for the short minimum value is minus 32,768. Alright, and if you look at the previous data types, you can see that the integer is the biggest, is the type which can store the biggest number. But there is one actually which is bigger than the integer. So I'm gonna type now the next data type which you're gonna look at, and that is the long, which is much bigger than the integer. So I'm gonna close the console. I'm gonna type the same code. I'm gonna type val my max long value. For the type I'm gonna choose long. I'm gonna put equals long. I'm gonna put dot max value. Again val my min long value. For the type I'm gonna choose long. Equals again. I'm gonna choose, now I'm gonna type again long dot minimum value. Now I'm gonna paste that code below here to output our variables, to output the minimum and maximum value which can be stored in a long data type. So I'm gonna change this to long. I'm gonna change this text also to long. Now I need to refer those two variables up here from up here. So I'm gonna delete this. I'm gonna type my max long value. So I'm gonna choose that, press enter, and here I'm gonna choose I'm gonna type my min long value. Let's output this code to see. Let's run actually our code to see what is the minimum and maximum value can be stored in a long data type. And as you can see, the range for the long is much bigger. Contrast that with the integer data type. You can see that it's a lot bigger, this number. So the long has a more has a range which is much bigger than the integer. And I'm gonna end this video now, and in the next video we're gonna look at how we can use those types and what are the relationships between them, right? So I'm gonna end this video now and see you in the next. Alright, now it's time to use those for data types for storing whole numbers in our code. So I'm gonna type some code below of those println statements. I'm gonna type val because I want this variable to be immutable. I don't want to change this value later. I'm gonna call it my number. It should be in camel case like our last names. And for the type, I'm not define explicitly a type here. I'm gonna put equals and I'm gonna put the literal value 28. And if I hover over my number, you can see that the type which was inferred is an int. Now you might be wondering how this makes any sense, because this 28 can easily fit in a byte or in a short or in a long. And that is because the default data type which is automatically inferred is the integer. So actually let's confirm that this can fit easily in other data types by running our code to see what are the minimum. And you can see that that number can easily fit in any of those data types from this list. And that is not happening because automatically, as I said, the default type which is inferred is the integer. And if you want this type to be a byte, you need to explicitly say here byte. Now if I hover over here, you can see that now it's a byte. And if I want to be a short, we need to type explicitly here short. So if I hover over here, now this is a short. And if I want this to be a long, I just type again here long. And for the long there are two ways. This is the first way to type the type explicitly here. Sorry, hover over here. It's a long. Or we can put a L suffix at the end of our number. But if I put a lowercase letter, it immediately shows this warning which says use an uppercase L instead of L, and that is because this can easily be confused with 1. So I'm gonna put an uppercase L, and if I hover over here, now this is a long, even though this can easily fit in any other data type. And if I delete this cell, and if I exceed the maximum value which can be stored in an integer, let's say that I put 28 or something here, and if I hover over here, you can see that now it inferred the type to be as a long, because now this number that we have here exceeds the maximum value which can be stored in an int. And you may be wondering now when to use one or the other, when to use the byte, when to use the short, when to use the long. And you will find the answer with the practice, with the working with them. But if I run this code, the byte and the short will be used in very specific cases, and most of the time you'll be working with the integer data type, right? Now I'm gonna end this video and see you in the next video. We're gonna talk about the next data types, which are the floating data types, and those are types which can hold numbers which have a fractional part or decimals. So see you in the next video. Alright, before we start our discussion about the floating point numbers, respectively about the float and double data type, it's important to know what are the difference between the data types for storing whole numbers under the hood, because we know now that there is a minimum maximum value which can be stored in those data types, and also we need to know what amount of space they occupy under the hood. And let's start with a byte. And a byte occupy 8 bits, right? So a byte occupy bits, and we say that a byte has a width of 8. And a short can store a large range of numbers and occupy 16 bits and has a width of 16. An int has a much larger range, as you know, and occupies 32 bits and has a width of 32. The point here that each data type occupies a different amount of memory. We can see that an int needs 4 times the amount of space than a byte does, for example. It's not particularly relevant to you to know these numbers, but it come up as an interview question, and it's useful to know that a certain type takes up more space than others. Alright, now let's close our project because I'm gonna create a new project. Now I'm gonna click here on new project because we have our previous project here. Alright. On the left hand side, again, Kotlin should be selected. For the name, I'm gonna call it, it should be in Pascal case, float and double. Alright, here is select for the build system IntelliJ, and for the project JDK, select the JDK there. I'm gonna click on next, and I'm gonna click on finish. Now our project is gonna be created. Right, let's delete this code. We can keep the args and the array string here. I'm gonna keep it to see that there is no, it's not making any difference in our code. I'm gonna delete the print ln statement, and I'm gonna expand this to the left because we don't really need the project pane. Actually, I'm gonna expand it full. It's not working full. I'm gonna then click here to hide the project pane. Alright. Floating point numbers are used for storing numbers which have a fractional part, which have decimals. So floating point numbers are used when you need more precision in your calculations, and as you'll see in the next video, this has a practicality. Now, to declare a floating point number, just type val, because I want this variable to be immutable. I'm gonna call it my number. Again, should be in camel case now. First letter, word should start with a lowercase letter, and the following words should start with capital letters. And for the type, I'm gonna choose. Let's actually not choose any type. Let's just put equals and try here to assign a value. Let's put 2.5. Okay. Now, if you hover over here, and if you look at what type this value has, what type this variable has, you can see that the type which was inferred is the double. So if we want to change the type, we can put here float, let's say to be a float. But look what happens when we do this. It says that the floating point literal does not conform to the safety type float. And that is because like in our example with the integer, the type which is inferred, which is automatically assumed by Kotlin, is double in this case. So even though we said here explicitly that we're going to store a float, because it typed here a literal value, it considers this to be a double. So to solve this, you need to delete this from here and put here at the end of our number an f. Now if I hover over here, now the variable has the type float. So this is how you declare a float variable. You need to put a f at the end of the number, a suffix. And for declaring a double, you can just type val. Let's call it my second number equals, and if I put 2.5 here, 2.5. Now if I hover over here, like I said previously, it automatically inferred the type to be a double. So if you don't specify a type, the automatically inferred type will be a double, because this is the type which is inferred for the floating point numbers. And this is similar to the integer type, because there we've seen that the type which is automatically inferred is an int. So here we have the same thing. So this is how we can declare a floating point number, and this is how we can declare a double. Now, what is the difference between this? They differ in the precision in which they have, and we'll see in the next example, in the next video, when we're going to be talking about operators and operations, what is the precision of a float and what is the precision of a double. And float comes from a floating precision number, and double comes from double precision number. And as the name implies, the double data type has more precision in our calculation. And you're gonna see an example of this in the next video, because we need to first learn about operators and operations before we introduce any kind of operator here, even though we've already used an operator, which is the assignment operator, which is this operator here. But we're going to talk about this in the next video. So I'm going to end this video now, and see you in the next video. We're going to start our discussion about operators, and also in that video we're going to see that the float has a smaller precision than the double, and the double is assumed to be the default type because has a bigger precision. So I'm gonna end this video now. See you in the next video. But before we end our video, actually let's output those values in our console. Let's output the values of the variables in our console. So I'm gonna type println statement below of our code, below the declaration of our variables, and inside the parentheses I'm gonna put a double pair of quotation marks. I'm gonna type my number equals $sign to get the value, the content of my number, and my second number we put equals again $sign, not here, my second number. Now let's print those values in our console. And as you can see, output is 2.5 and 2.5. But if I hover over here, you can see that the type because it's explicitly given here, is the float. And if I hover over here, this is the double. But let's see what happens if I delete the fractional part, and I just actually you can put a lowercase f here or an uppercase f, like this. If you run this code again, you'll have the same output. Again, now let's delete the fractional part and just let an f there, And here let's also delete the fractional part, and let's run our code, and you may know what is gonna happen now. It printed 2.0 for my number, because we said explicitly here that this is a flow, so it prints the fractional part. But in the case of my number, it only outputted 2, because now this is inferred, if you hover over here, as an int. So one solution to this may be to type here double and try to see what happens. And if I hover over here, it says the integer literal does not conform to the expected type double. And it's correct, because this is assumed to be an int. So you cannot, even though we said explicitly here that this is gonna store doubles, here we put an int, an integer value. So if I delete the type here, let's say if I try to put a D here, actually there is no D for the double. There is no, like in the case of the float, even if I try to put a uppercase D, there is no way to add a suffix to our variable. The only way is to put directly here 2.0, and now this is inferred as a double, as you can see here. And if I run this, now it outputted 2.0 and 2.0 in both of our variables. Alright, I'm gonna end this video now, and see you on the next video. Alright, so far in our course we've only dealt with data types which can store numbers, but there are two different data types which we're gonna look at in this video, which you can use for storing a different type of data, and we're gonna see what kind of data you can store. But those data types are called the char data type and the boolean data type. But first, let's create our project. Let's create a new project. I'm gonna give it a name. I'm gonna call it char and boolean. Again, it should be in Pascal case. Make sure for the build system that you select IntelliJ, and make sure that you have the project JDK selected. So I'm gonna click on next to create our project. I'm gonna click on finish. Now our project is gonna be created. On the left hand side, you have the project pane. You have our code auto-generated for us, even though this code we're gonna delete this code which is inside the curly braces, because you don't need this code. So I'm gonna delete this code, and let's also hide the project pane, because you don't need a project pane. And let's see how we can declare a char data type, and after that we're gonna talk about where you can use the char data type in a specific case, and what specific cases you can use. So I'm gonna type val, because I want this variable to be immutable. I don't want to change its value later. I'm gonna call it my char value. Again, it should be in camel case. And for the type, I'm gonna put colon. I'm gonna choose char. Press enter. Let's put equals, and let's now assign a value to this variable. So this time I'm gonna type a single pair of quotation marks, not a double pair of quotation marks like we did in our string data type. And in a char data type, we can store only a single symbol, and that symbol can be a letter, a number, or an exclamation point or mark. So I'm gonna put here a D, a single letter D. And you may be wondering now, what is this? What is a specific case where you can use a char value? A specific case can be, let's say, if you want to store the last key pressed by a user. So this is a specific case where you can use the char data type. Now let's print this value in our console to see that it should be in lowercase letters. Print ln, and you can print it by the usual way, where you put here a double pair of quotation marks, and we type a $, and here we type the name of our variable, my char value. Press enter. I messed up the code. Let's delete this. Now if I run this, the console will start in a short moment, and you're gonna see the output of the letter D. Right, so the console opened, and now we have output down here, the letter D. So this is the usual way of referring a variable. But you can refer the variable even like this, by not putting the $sign, deleted the $sign, and also the quotation mark at the beginning. Now if I run this, it's gonna still output the letter D. So we see that we have now also the letter D. So this is another way of printing the value in a variable, but this is not really the usual way to do it. Now let's take a look at the next data type, and that is the Boolean data type. And to declare a Boolean data type, we type again val, because again I want this to be immutable, and I'm gonna call it my, in camel case it should be Boolean value, and for the type choose Boolean. And a Boolean data type can only store a true or a false value. So you can only assign here true or false. So if you type now let's print those values, but this time I'm gonna put the parentheses, and I'm gonna put the quotation marks. I'm gonna type my char, my char value equals $sign my char value, and my, let's type the name here, Boolean value equals, and let's put here the $sign my Boolean value. Now if you run this code, now you can see that my char value, which is this text here, has this value, which is the content of this variable that we're referring here, and my Boolean value, which is our variable, the name of our variable, has the content of false, so it printed here false. Now Boolean data types, the Boolean data types are going to be used in our code a lot, because the Boolean data types can be used for controlling the flow of the program. So you can you're gonna see that in combination with the if statement, at which you're gonna look at in the next video, and the next videos. You can actually control the flow of the program, because usually the flow of the program is from top to bottom, and with the Boolean data type and with an if statement, as you'll see, you can control actually what you can control what parts of the code are compiled or not, based on a certain condition, if that condition is false or if that condition is true. So Boolean data types are gonna be used, as you'll see, a lot in our code and in your coding career, as you'll see. So these are the two data types that can be used for storing either a single character or a character, and this is the data type which can be used for storing true or false, which is called the Boolean data type. Also, you may saw already here that you can delete the types here, because as we talked about, Kotlin has what is called the type inference. So can it infer the type by looking at what value assigned to it. So in this case, it knows that this is a type of char. So here you can see that the type is a Boolean. Alright, but before we end our video, let's do a little recap about the 8 data types that we looked at throughout these videos. And the 8 data types are the byte, short, int, and long. Those are for storing the whole numbers. And the next 2 data types are the float and double for storing floating point numbers or numbers which have a fractional part, decimals. And the next 2 ones are the ones that we looked at in this video, and those are the char and the boolean. And those data types are also called primitive data types because it has to do with, they are called like that because it has to do with how they are stored in memory. And a string data type is not really a primitive data type because it's stored a little differently. Also, as you're gonna see, the string data type has special language support. So you can consider these 8 primitive data types as the building blocks for data manipulation. And in the next video, I'm gonna look at this data manipulation, but by looking specifically at what operations we can do with those data types, because throughout this video we only looked at how we can store values and how we can output those values, but in a real app you'll need to manipulate that data to add or to subtract something, and we're gonna look at all of this in the next video. See you next. Alright, so far in our videos we only looked at how we can store different values in our variables, how to output them to the console, but in a real app you'll need to do some mathematical calculations. So in this video we're gonna learn about that. We're gonna look at operators. So first let's create a new project. I'm gonna click on new project. I'm gonna speed up the process now a little bit because we did this already a few times. So I'm gonna call it operators. I'm gonna select IntelliJ, click on next and click on finish. Now a project is going to be created in a short moment. Again, on the left hand side I have the project pane, and we have the main function and the code auto-generated for us. Now we're going to delete the code inside the curly braces of main function because we don't need this code. And also I'm going to hide the project pane because I don't need the project pane. And first let's declare 2 variables. I'm going to declare the first variable as a var because I want to reassign its value later. I'm going to call it let's say x, and in a real app you should use more descriptive names because the name of the variable should say what the variable is doing. Anyway, I'm going to put equals, I'm going to assign a value of 5, and the next variable I'm going to declare it as a val because I don't want to change its value later. I'm going to call it I. I'm going to put a value of 3 here. And next I'm going to declare another variable. This is going to be also a val. I'm going to call it result, and we're going to store the sum of 5 and 3 here. And to do that we type here x, and this is the first operator that we're going to look at, and that is the add or the plus operator. So I'm going to put here x plus I. Now let's print this result. I'm going to type println. I'm going to put double pair of quotation marks. I'm going to type result, the text equals $sign to get the value of the variable here. I'm going to press enter to fill that suggestion for me. And now let's run this code to see what is going to output. You're going to see the output 8 here because 5 plus 3 is 8. The console should open in a short moment. Right, so it outputted the result equals to 8 because 5 plus 3 is 8. Now, what we have differently here, and we didn't have previously, is that now we're using the variables here, and we're not using literals like we have here 5 and 3 typed directly. And it's important to clarify some names here. And first is the name operand. An operand is any object which is affected by an operator. In our case, the operands are x and I because those variables are affected by the operator plus, because it sums their values, and then it puts these values in the variable result. So those two variables, x and I called operand. Also, if you had here literal values, if we put it here, let's say 5 and 3 directly, these two are also called operands. So literals or variables are called operands. Any object which is affected by an operator is called an operand, because if you now you're gonna see also 8 here. But let's change this back to I and x. And there is another way to output the value of x plus I by using a placeholder, what is called a placeholder. And to do that, let's first delete this line of code. And this now is red because we don't have the variable declared. I'm gonna delete what is inside the quotation marks, and I'm gonna type here x plus I, the text, equals, and now I'm gonna put here $sign, and I'm gonna put curly braces, and inside the curly braces I'm gonna type, let's click here to make it clear, x plus I. So this is called a placeholder, and you can use this, and in a placeholder you can only put expressions, and an expression is a construct which evaluates to a single value. So in our case, x plus I evaluates to a single value because it returns the value 8. So this is why we can put here x plus I. And even though if you put something which will not be an expression here, IntelliJ is gonna warn you, and I'm gonna see in the following minutes an example of that. Now let's output this, and you're gonna see the same result, but now we have the different text here. We're gonna have x plus I. So now I have x plus I equals 8, which is the correct result. Now let's copy this 4 times, and to make that easier, we can press Ctrl D or Command D on Mac. So I'm gonna press Ctrl D 4 times. Now let's change this to minus, because we're gonna look at the subtraction. Now here we're gonna look at the multiplication operator, which is an asterisk operator. So I need to put here inside the curly braces the asterisk, because this is where the expression is evaluated. And the next is the division, so you're gonna put here a forward slash. So I'm gonna put here also forward slash, right? And you know this operators for a math class, this one, but one that is not so well known outside the programming is it's called the modulus operator. And the modulus operator is the operator which gives us the remainder of a division. So the modulus operator is a percentage sign. So put percentage sign here and percentage sign here. Right? Now, if you run this code, alright, so now we have the output down here, and we have x plus I is 8 because 5 plus 3 is 8, x minus y is 2 because 5 minus 3 is 2, x times y is 15 because 5 times 3 is 15, x divided by y, and this is interesting, is 1, but because those variables are of type int, they're inferred automatically to be of type int, it dropped completely the fractional part here. So you don't have here 1.6 or something, you have only the integer part, which is 1. And here we have the modulus operator, and this gives us a remainder of 5 divided by 3, which is 1, and has a remainder of 2. Now, if you want to have here the fractional part, you need to declare one of the variable as a type as a floating point number, and that can be or either a float or a double. So I'm gonna declare the I variable as a double, so I'm gonna put 3.0 here, and now all the variables, all the results here are gonna be of type double. So if you run this, you're gonna see the fractional part for all the variables here. Now you can see now we have 8.0, 2.0, 15.0, and here we have 1.66666 and 7. Now it shows also the fractional part, and for the remainder we've also have the fractional part here. So now the type of the type of the expression is a double, because we declare here as a double this variable I as a double, and the next one is widen automatically. You don't need to declare also the x as a double. It will be if you want, widen automatically by the fact that we declare the I variable as a double. Alright, and let's continue. And often in programming you'll want to increase a variable by a certain number, and to do that, let's first let's declare again the variable result down here. Let's declare it as a var because I want to reassign it. Let's call it result, and let's put again x plus I here. Now if you want to increase, let's say, the value of this variable by 2, we can type something like result equals result. Let's say that I want to increase this variable by 2. I'm gonna put result equals result plus 2, and this equals operator is different from a mathematical equals, because this equals operator is not saying that result equals result plus 2, because it's incorrect. What this equals operator is, it's also called this an assignment operator, and what it's doing is that it assigns, first it adds 2 to our variable result, and then it stores that result of that expression in our variable result. All right, so let's print this value to see what we have here. So if I print this, you should see 10 here. Println, not print. And I'm gonna put here result equals $sign result, and if you run this code, you're gonna see 10. Right, so you have 10, but let's delete the fractional part here to have the type of the variable as integers. So let's run this code again. So now we have 10 here, result equals 10. And let's copy this code again 4 times. Let's add a space. So now I messed up the code, and if you mess up the code like I did here, you can undo this thing by going to edit and click on undo paste, or the shortcut is Control Z, and you'll see the corresponding shortcut in a Mac here on the right. So please press here, and now our code is restored here, as you can see. So let's copy this again. Let's press enter, and let's paste this down. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, now let's change this one to minus. Let's change this to multiplication, which is the asterisk operator. Let's change this to division, which is the /. And let's change this to modulus, which is the percentage sign. Now, if you run this code, let's run it from the top right hand side now. What you're gonna see is that first we have 10 because of now the result has a value of 8 because x plus I is 5 plus 3, we have 8. And now here we're adding 2 to our result, and then we print that value in that variable in our console, and that is gonna output 10. Then next we decrement that variable by 2 and we have 8. Next we multiply that variable by 2, so we have 8 times 2, which is 16, which is the result here. Next we have a result divided by 2, and 16 divided by 2 is 8, so we have 8 here. Now we have result modulus 2, and 8 modulus 2 is 0 because 8 divided by 2 has no remainder, right? Next you can see that we have all of those underlines here, and if you hover over one of them, it's gonna say replaceable with operator assignment. So there is a shorter way to write the same thing that we have here, or there is an abbreviation to write the same thing that we have here and here and here and here, because they are so often used in programming. There is a abbreviation for all of them. So let's click on replace with plus and equals, replace with minus and equals, replace with multiplication and equals, with division and equals, and with modulus and equals here. Alright, so this is the abbreviation of what we had previously, of a shorter way to write the same thing. So if you run this code now, you're gonna see that it's gonna output the exact values that you had previously. So we have 10, 8, 16, 8 again, and 0. So this is a shorter way of abbreviating, or actually this is a way of abbreviating what we had previously, because as I said, they are very, very often used in programming. Alright, now another important thing to know is operator precedence. So first let's type again a println statement, and I'm gonna put a double pair of quotation marks, and inside the quotation marks I'm gonna put the text 3. So this is the text 3 plus 3 times, let's say 4. Now also inside the quotation marks, let's put a dollar, let's put equals here, the text, and let's put a $sign here, and now let's put curly braces, and inside the curly braces I'm gonna put 3 plus 3 times 4. Let's click here to make it clear, times 4. Now if you run this code, now you see that it outputted 15 because multiplication has precedence over addition. So it first multiplies 3 times 4, which is 12, and then it adds 3 to our result, so we have 15. But like in a math class, you can control which expression is evaluated first by putting parentheses. So if I put parentheses here, now this will be evaluated first, 3 plus 3, and then it will multiply the result by 4. So if you run this code, you're gonna see 3 plus 3 is 6, times 4 is 24. So you're gonna see 24 here now. So you can see that operators have precedence, but you can control that precedence using parentheses, like we did here. So multiplication and division have precedence over addition and subtraction. Alright, there are two other operators which can be used for increasing or decreasing the value of a variable exactly by 1. And let's look at this operator. But first, let's use our variable x that we declare above, and let's assign a value of 0 to it. And to use the increment and decrement operator, this is how they are called. Let's use the println statement first to let's put a double pair of quotation marks here, and let's type x equals, and let's put $, and let's type here x. And to use the increment operator, we type plus plus, right? And what this is gonna do is gonna increment the value of our variable, which now is 0, by 1. And there is another way to increment the value of our variable by putting the increment operator or the plus plus operator in front of our variable, not at the end of our variable. So we can type again println down here. Let's put quotation marks, and I'm gonna put x equals, and now I'm gonna put $, plus plus x. But this now is not working because $sign only works if you refer a variable. So to solve that, we're gonna put this in parentheses, actually in curly braces. So let's put this in curly braces, and let's put the above one also in curly braces. Not here. All right, and both of these increment the value of x by 1. They differ in what value they return. So the first returns the value of x, which is 0, and then it increments it. And the next increment operator, which is before the name of before the variable, it increments the variable and then return its value. So what you're gonna see if you output this code is gonna be interesting. So if you output this code, let's bring it down, you're gonna see 0 and 2, and you may be wondering how this makes any sense, because you have incremented the value here. And this happens because this first returns the value of x, so it returns the value of x, and then it prints the value of x, which is 0, and then it increments. So now the x has the value of 1. When the next println statement is executed, now the variable x is incremented by 1, so it has a value of 1, and now it will be incremented again, but it will also be returned, not like in the previous increment operator, which is at the end. So now it will have the value of 2, okay? And there is the same operator is available for decrementing. So if you want to decrement a variable exactly by 1, I can put here x, let's put equals, let's put curly braces, actually the $sign, curly braces, and you can put x minus minus, and let's call the println function again. I'm gonna put x equals $sign again, curly braces, and let's put now the decrement operator, which is the minus minus, in front of our variable. Now you're gonna see something similar, but in the inverse way. So now we have 2 and 0, and let's explain this also. So again, this println statement is executed. Now the x has the value 2, and it returns 2, and then it decrements. So it prints the value of 2, and then it decrements the value of our variable x by 1. So now we have 1. When the next println statement is executed or function is called, now the value is 1, so and it first decrements the value and then it returns the value of the variable. So now we have 0 because it was decremented. This is why you have 0 and 2 and 2 and 0 here. Alright? So you see above here that I declare the variable as a var, so I can reassign its value down here to 0. Right, this is our discussion about operators. There are more operators, but in order to talk about the next operators, we need to first talk about an if statement. So now it's time to look at comments. And comments are nodes that you can add to your code, and they are ignored by the compiler. And usually they are used when you want to add some description about the code. So what you want to indicate what the code is doing, because you may wrote some code and you come to that code a few weeks later and forgot what it's doing. And by putting comments, you can see specifically what that code is doing. And in Kotlin, we have two types of comments. The first is so-called end-of-line comment. And to add an end-of-line comment, we put 2 slashes. And here we put our comment. Let's say here we are doing operations. So this is an end-of-line comment, and this is a text which simply says here we are doing operations. And this is, as I said, an end-of-line comment. The next comment that you can use is so-called the block comment. And to use a block comment, we put slash asterisk, and now you can press enter, or you can put asterisk and slash to add the next to close this comment, and you press enter, and as you can see, it added automatically this asterisk and slash, or you can type this yourself. And here you can put some text, which can be some it can be something which is going to say what the code is doing. So those are the two types of comments that you can use in Kotlin: the end of line comment and the block comment. And you can also use comments to disable some code. So if I put 2 slashes here, now that line of code is going to be ignored by the compiler. So this is our discussion about comments. See you in the next video. Alright, before we continue the discussion about operators, let's first introduce the if-then-else statement. And let's first start talking about how usually our code is executed. And usually our code is executed from top to bottom. And that means that our code is executed line by line. And that is the flow of the program. But with an if-then-else statement, you can break the flow of the program by imposing a condition. And you can say to the computer to execute a particular section of code only if a condition is true. So let's see how we can do that. So let's first declare a variable. I'm going to type val. This is going to be immutable. Not going to reassign its value. I'm going to call it it's active, and I'm going to put equals, and I'm going to assign a value of true to it. So it's going to be of type boolean. On the next line, I'm going to type the if keyword, and now IntelliJ is giving us some hints here. I'm going to press enter, and inside the parentheses, we put our condition. So here I'm going to type is active, the variable. And now I'm going to type equals equals. Notice that here now we have 2 equals. And here we type true. Next, we put a left curly brace. And now you can add the right curly brace, or you can press enter, and the right curly brace is going to be added automatically by IntelliJ for you. So if I press enter now, you can see that on the line 40, the right curly brace was added automatically. Now, let's type here println statement. So I'm going to type println, press enter, and quotation marks, and here we're going to type the text, the user is active, right? And if you run this code, let's see what happens. And we get the output, the user is active, which is the text that we typed here. And let's first talk about what we have here. And the if statement checks to see, as I said, to see if this condition inside the parentheses is true, if this expression returns true. And it does that by checking to see if the operands are identical or if they are the same. So it checks to see if the content of the variable it's active, which is true, it's equal to true. And that sounds confusing, but it's true because our variable it's active has a value of true, and here we're checking to see if our if those two are equal or if they are the same, and that is true, and this expression returns true. And in effect, the code inside the curly braces is executed. But if I change this to false, so if I change this value and if I run this code now, this condition inside the parentheses is going to be false and the code is not going to be executed. So you can see now that we don't see any output because this condition is false, and because the condition is false, the code inside the curly braces is not going to be executed. But if you want to cover the part where the condition is false, so if you want to execute some code even though the condition is false, you can type here else. And here you also need to put curly braces. So I'm going to put the left curly brace, I'm going to press enter, and the right curly brace was added automatically for me. Now I'm going to type println, and inside the parentheses I'm going to put the user is not active. So now what is going to happen is that this condition is going to fail, it's going to be false because the two operands are not equal, respectively is active and true. And it's going to be executed the else part in this case. It's going to be executed the code which is inside the curly braces of the else. So if you run this code, you're going to see the output, the user is not active. So as you can see, now it says the user is not active because this condition was false, this Boolean expression returns false, and it jumps to the else part. So this is how we can use the else part. Now, what we can also do is to add another if statement below our if statement to chain more if statements to check for more conditions. But to do that, we need to use another operator, which is called the greater than operator, which is an operator which you may know from your math class. And to do that, let's change first the variable. So I'm going to type here a value of 100 to make it an integer. And also I'm going to change its name, and to change the name of the variable, go right click on the variable, go to rename, to refactor, and go to rename. And now if you change the name of the variable, here is going to be change everywhere where the variable is called. So if I look what happens if I delete the name here, it's changed also on the line 38 where we're referring the variable. And now I'm going to call the variable my number, and I'm going to press enter. Now the name of the variable is updated. And now this condition is not correct. Here you need to put a greater than sign. So I'm going to put a greater than sign, and let's check for let's say if my number is greater than 150, and this is false now because my number has a value of 100. So this is going to evaluate to false, this condition, this expression. Now let's add here another if statement. So we're going to put here else if, and inside the parenthesis we're going to put the condition. And now I'm going to type again my number, my variable, our variable. Now here we're going to put let's say greater than 90. Now this condition is true, so let's add also the curly braces because we need to put our code inside there. Let's put here a println also. Let's type here greater than 90. And here let's also change the test to greater than 150. And here you can put all the conditions. Here you can put all the condition failed, because the else part is going to be executed only if all the condition that we have here, which is for that my number is greater than 150, and this is false, my number has a value of 100. And if our else if condition also evaluates to false, only then the else part is going to be executed. So let's run our code to see what if statement is going to be executed, what part. So you can see that we get greater than 90, and that means that this condition is true, because it's true that my number has a value of 100, and it checks to see if my number is greater than 90, which is true. So it executes the code which is inside the else if part, right? Now the next operator that you can use is greater than or equal to. So you can put here greater than or equal. Now what is gonna check to see is what is gonna check is to see if the number that we're comparing to, respectively my number, is greater than 100 or equal to, greater than 150 or equal to 150. So let's change this to, let's say 149. So look what happens now. So now it's executed this part, the else if part, because this is greater, the number greater than 90. But if I put here greater, let's change the value of my number to 150 to see what happens. And now we get the output greater than 150. And this is correct, because now this condition is true. My number is greater than equals to 150. And my number has the value of 150. It's not greater than 150, but it's greater than or equal to. So it's equal to 150. So now this condition is satisfied, and the code inside this curly brace is executed, which is greater than 150. All right. Now I'm gonna end this video, and in the next video we're gonna continue our discussion about those operators. Alright, so now let's continue our discussion about the next operators that you can use in Kotlin, and let's start with the less than operator. And to do that, let's first change the value of the variable my number to 100. And to use the less than operator, we put here a less than sign, which you probably know from your math class. Now, if you run this code, I should change here the text to make it consistent. Let's type here so now if you run this, now get the output less than 150, and this is true because the value of the variable my number is less than 150, so this condition now evaluates to true. The next operator that you can use is less than or equal to, similar to greater than or equal to operator. And to use the less than or equal to operator, we put here a less sign and the equal sign, right? And let's change the value here to 150 to make it clear. Now let's change also the value of the variable to 150, and let's also change the text here. Now if you run this code, you're gonna see the output less than or equal to 150, because now the else if part and the condition of the else if statement evaluates to true, because now the value of my number, it's not less than 150 because it's 150, but it's less than or equal to 150. So this condition evaluates to true. All right. The next operator that you can use is called the logical not equal operator, and that operator is used to check if two operands, respectively, if my number, let's say, and 150 are not the same. Let's see how we can do that. And to do that, we type here an exclamation mark and an equal sign. And this operator here, which is the exclamation mark, is gonna check to see if those two operands, respectively my number and 150, are not the same. And only then the condition is gonna evaluate to true. So let's run this code to see what happens. So now we get the output less than or equal to 150 because we still have the value 150, so it jumps to the else if part. But if I change this to, let's say, 100, now look what happens. Now it executes the if. Now this condition evaluates to true because now this operator is checking to see if the two operands, if the value of my number, the value of my number is not equal to 150, and that is true, they're not equal, and this is why you get here the output. But let's change the output to make it clear. Let's type here they are not equal. So if you run this code, you're gonna see the output they are not equal because that condition now evaluates to true. So this is how you can use the logical not equal operator. Also, with the logical not operator, we can change the value of a Boolean expression from true to false and from false to true. In other words, we can negate its value. And to do that, let's first declare the code that we had previously. So I'm going to declare again the val variable it's active. I'm going to assign a value of true. I'm gonna type the if statement again. I'm gonna put the same condition, equals true. Here you can put the left curly brace and press enter, or you can add the right curly brace if you want, but it will be added automatically for you. I'm gonna type else, also the left curly brace, press enter. I'm gonna put the text that we had previously. Alright, now if you run this code, you're gonna see the output, the user is active because this is gonna evaluate to true. They are equal, they're the same. Let's expand this. So you see the output, the user is active because this condition evaluates to true. And before we look at the logical not operator, how we can negate the value, let's first see how we can write the same expression that we have here in a shorter way by abbreviating. So because you have noticed probably that we have an underline here, and if you hover over here, it says that the Boolean expression can be simplified. So let's click here, simplify Boolean expression, to see what happens. So now we get if it's active, and then print then execute the code inside the curly braces. So this thing now does the exact same thing that we did previously. So it checks to see if the value of its active is equal to true. So it's a shorter way of writing the same thing. And now you get the output, the user is active. But with the equal not operator, you can put the exclamation mark in front of our it's active expression, and it's now it's gonna negate its value. Now it's gonna change its value from true to false. So now if you run this code, now you're gonna see the output, the user is not active, because now this logical not operator switch is switching its value to false. So now this will evaluate to false, and it's going to execute the else part that we have if the user is not active. And you can do the same for false. So if you put here false, now let's actually execute this without the logical not operator to see what happens. Now this will not execute, so it will execute the else part. So you see the user is not active. But if I put the logical not operator in front of its active, now it's gonna change its value from false to true, and now this will evaluate to true, and it will execute the code inside the curly brace of the if. So now you see that it says the user is active. So this is how you can use the logical not operator to flip a value from false to true or from true to false. And you can do this for every Boolean expression that you use. So you can put the logical not operator in front of this. Actually, not in front of this. You can put the logical not operator, generally speaking, in front of any Boolean expression, right? So this is our discussion about operators. So in the next video, we're going to look how we can combine multiple expressions to create a bigger expression, which itself returns true or false value. See you in the next. Alright, so I deleted the code that we had previously. You can keep the code that we had previously if you want, but I deleted it to make things more clear. And in this video, we're going to look at how we can combine multiple expressions, which in themselves can return a Boolean value, which can be either true or false. And let's start with the first operator, which is called the logical AND operator. But let's first declare two variables. I'm going to declare a val variable. I'm going to call it it's playing. I'm going to assign a value of true to it, so it's going to be of type Boolean. And on the next line, I'm going to declare another variable, also a val, and it's going to be called score. And it's going to have a value of 80. Now, down here we type if, and inside the parentheses we type is playing equals true. So this is the equals to operator. I didn't talk really a lot about the equals to operator, but the equals to operator checks to see if the two operands are the same. So it, in contrast to the one equal operator, the one equal operator assigns what's on the right to our variable which is on the left. So in this case, assigns true to our variable is playing, so or it's assigned 80 to our variable score. The two equals or the equals to operator is different because it checks to see if what you have on the left or what you have on the left and on the right are the same or are identical. Next. And we know from the previous video that we can abbreviate this. We can write this in a shorter way by putting just is playing. This is going to be equivalent to what we had previously, because as you can see, it says that you can simplify the Boolean expression. And now we're gonna use the logical AND operator. And use the logical AND operator, we type two ampersand signs, and here we type score. Now we're gonna use again the equals operator. This time we need to use it. There is not a short way to check for. And we type if score equals to 100. Right? So this expression inside the parentheses is gonna evaluate to true only if both expressions, respectively is playing and score equals to 100, evaluates to true. So only if those two conditions are true, only then the code inside the parentheses, inside the curly braces actually, is going to be executed. So let's say that in a real app here you can add the logic to open the next level, but here you go, just going to output some text. So I'm going to type here next level opened, right? And also I'm going to add the else part here. And here you're going to put also println statement. And inside the parentheses you're going to type still at the same level. Now if you run this code, you're going to see the output still at the same level, because not those conditions are not both true. Is playing is true, but it's playing is equal to true, but our score is not equal to 100, so this is going to evaluate to false, and the entire expression inside the parentheses is going to return false, so it's going to execute the else part. Now, if we change the value of our variable score to 100, now both expressions are true. Is playing equals to true, and score, and the score is equal to 100. So now both of our expressions are true, and gonna see the text next level opened. And now you see that it output the next level opened. So this is the logical AND operator, and you're gonna be using the logical AND operator a lot in your code. Alright, so now it's time to continue our discussion about operators, and we're gonna look at the next operator which can be used to combine multiple expression, and that is the logical OR operator. And the logical OR operator evaluates an expression or multiple expression, in this case to true, if one of the condition is true or if both conditions are true. So let's see an example of this. But first, let's comment the code that we have here, because it will make things confusing. So go to code and select comment with line comment, or you can press the shortcut control /. Now, let's declare two variables down here. The first is going to be a val. I'm going to call it num1. I'm going to assign a value of 5 to it. Second is going to be also a val. It's going to be called num2, and I'm going to assign a value of 3 to it, or 4. Now I'm going to type the if then else statement. I'm going to type the if keyword. Inside the parentheses, I'm going to put the condition. First is if num1 is greater than 0. And now, to use the logical OR operator, we type two vertical bars here. Now we put our next condition, or our next expression, and that if num2 is also greater than 0. And we put a curly brace, press enter to add the right curly brace. And we put also the else part. And inside the curly braces of the if, let's print some text. Let's say the condition is true. Alright, now if you run this code, you're gonna see the output, the condition is true, because now both conditions are true, and the logical operator returns true if both conditions are true, or if one of the condition is true. So let's see if we change this to -3, and now our second condition, num2 greater than 0, is false. So now this is also going to evaluate to true, because the logical OR operator returns true if one of the condition is true, or if both conditions are true. So now we get condition is true. But if you change this to also to -5, now our both conditions are false. Now you're gonna see that it's gonna be executed the else part, because this condition now is gonna be false, because both conditions, both expressions, num1 greater than 0 and num2 greater than 0 are false. Alright, so let's change it back to 5. Now if you run this code, you're gonna see the condition is true, because at least one of the condition is true, which is this one, num1 greater than 0, even though the num2 condition is false. Alright, and this is how you can use the logical OR operator. Alright, now it's time to see how you can use the if then else statement as an expression. And that means that the if then else statement can return a value which can be stored in a variable. So let's see how you can do that. But first, actually let's keep this code that we have here. And to use the if then else statement as an expression, we declare a variable first. So I'm going to declare a val, and let's give it a name, and we'll call it let's say text. And to use the if then else statement as an expression, we put equals, and after the equals we put our if then else statement. Now we need to assign a value to our variable text to use it as an expression, and the value is going to be the last expression in the curly braces. So here if I type the text, let's say this is text 1, and down here if I type in quotation marks this is text 2. Now if I add a println here at the end, and if I print the value of the variable text that we declare above, let's put a $sign, and if I type text here, now you can see our variable, it says that it's of type string. So if I run this code now, you're gonna see first this println inside the curly braces, which says the condition is true, and after that you're gonna see this text being assigned to our variable text, and it will be outputted down here by the println statement. So you see this is text 2. Actually I was wrong, that condition is false, because here you have -5 and -3, and this condition values to false. And the last expression in the curly braces is assigned as a value to our variable. Now what you can also do is to remove the curly braces, but it's recommended to not use the curly braces if you have only one statement in your if then else statement. So let's delete the println here, let's delete the curly brace here, let's also delete the curly brace here, let's delete the println statement here, and let's also delete the curly brace here. So now this will work the same, it will work like previously, but so now you'll see the same output without the condition, without this text. The condition is false because now we don't have the println statement. So now we get this is text 2 because this condition evaluates to false, and it assigns this value to our variable text. Then down here it prints it. So also you see that this they are not aligned here, this our variable. And to format your code, just go to code and click reformat code, or press Ctrl Alt L on Windows, or you can use another shot. You can use the corresponding shortcut on Linux or Mac. So click on code, and now you're gonna see that our code is formatted. If you run this, now see this is text 2, but let's change this to 5. Now this condition will evaluate to true, and this expression is gonna be assigned to our variable text. So if we run this, you're gonna see this now our variable text is assigned the value of this is text 1 because this condition is true, and assign this value. To make things more clear, you can use you can type your code something like this. Now this does the exact same thing as previously. So if you run this code now, you're gonna see that now it says the same thing. This is text 1. Now you may be wondering what type this variable is. So if you hover over it, it says that it is of type string. But look, what can I do? I can put here a number. So if this condition evaluates to false, this is going to be assigned to our variable text. So if I run this now, now I get this is text 1, and let's put here -5 for the condition to be false. And if you run this code now, you're going to see 5, and you may be wondering how this makes any sense, because previously our variable was of type string, but if you hover over here, now it says val text, and the type is this thing, comparable anyway. But what is simply doing here is looking at the condition. It's looking first at the if statement, and if this condition is true, then it assigns our text to our variable, and then it infers the type to be a string, right? If this condition is false, then this part is skipped, and then it assigns this value of 5 to our variable text, and then our variable is going to be of type int. So there is no case in which both both values going to be assigned to our variable. So this is why you can use here text and here an integer, even though, but if you declare explicitly here that this variable is going to store only strings, only sequence of characters or text, now here you get an warning because it says the integer liter does not conform to the expected type stream. So in other words, we cannot put here a number because we said that explicitly here that is going to store only strings. But if you omit the type, that is going to work. So you can decide what, depending on the context, what to choose. So this way of writing the if then else statement in one single line like we have here, it's okay as long as we use the if then else statement as an expression, or in other words, if you're assigning a value to a variable, like in our case. But if you have multiple instruction in your also if you have a single instruction, you can also omit the curly braces. But most of the time it's recommended to use the curly braces because that allows us to execute more than one instruction or the statement in your code, and it also makes the code more clear. So let's change this code from an expression to just an if then else statement to see why. So I'm gonna change this. I'm gonna add the curly braces. Let's format the code. Press Ctrl Alt L. Alright. And also let's change this. Let's delete this text. Let's add two println statements here. Alright. Now if you run this code, you're gonna see this part executed, the else part, because this condition is false. Both of our condition, respectively num1 is not greater than 0, and also num2 is also not greater than 0. So this is gonna return false, and it's gonna execute the else part. Right, but now if you change this to 5, and now one of the conditions is gonna be true, and as you know, this entire expression is gonna evaluate to true now because at least one of the expression is true. So if you run this code, now you see this condition is true, and also we see our second println statement. This condition is true and some text. But look what happens if I let's say if I delete the else part, right? And if I delete the curly braces here, alright? And now if I run this code, you see that now both statements are executed. But as I said, if you don't use curly braces, just only one of the statements is going to be executed. So why you have both of these? Because first is executed as part of the if statement because this condition is true, and the next one is executed because it's part of the code, because it's read from top to bottom. But if I change this to false, and now I want both statements, respectively with this one and this one, to not be executed, look what happens. Now get this condition is true and some text. So the first instruction in our if then statement is omitted because it's part of the if then statement, but the second one it's executed because it's part of the code, so it's going to be read anyway. So this is why you need to always use curly braces. In this way the entire code is going to be either executed or omitted. So this is our discussion about the if then else statement, and you should always use the curly braces, and for the else part you should use the curly braces, and only omit the curly braces if you have only one single statement or one single expression. If you want to use the if then statement as an expression to assign a value to a variable. But if you have just one single statement, let's say you have something like this, you can omit the curly braces like this. So now you can see that everything works fine. So you can use it like this. If you have one single statement like we have here, you just print some text to our console. Or if you use it as an expression, so if you store a value in a variable. So see you in the next video. Alright, now it's time to look at the next control flow statement that we can use in Kotlin besides the if then else statement, and that is the when statement or the when expression. But first let's create a new project. I'm gonna call it control flow. It should be in Pascal case. Select IntelliJ, click on next and finish. Right, now let's delete the code inside the curly braces. Let's hide the project pane, and let's first declare a variable. It's gonna be a val. It's gonna be called alarm, and I'm gonna assign a value of 12 to it. Now, to declare a when statement, we type here when, we put parentheses, and inside the parentheses we put our argument. In this case, it's our variable alarm. Next, we put space and we put the curly braces. Press enter, and now we put the expression here. So here I'm gonna put the value, let's say 12. Now I'm gonna put a minus sign and a greater than sign, so we have this arrow, and here I'm gonna type print ln. This is the code that is gonna be executed, and I'm gonna type the time is $sign alarm. Let's press Ctrl D to duplicate this 2 times or 3 times, and let's change the last one to an else. Alright, let's change those values here to 7 and 14. Now let's run this code to see what to get in the output, and after that we're going to discuss our code. So get in the output the time is 12, and we get that because what the when statement is doing, it's using this argument that we passed here. In this case it's our variable called alarm, and it's comparing this the value of this argument with all the branches that we have here. Respectively, it's going to compare it with the expression that we have on the left, because on the left we have the expression. This arrow sign is saying execute this code on the right if this expression on the left is true. In this case, if our alarm equals 12 and it's true, we have a value of 12, so this branch is executed and it executes the code on the right, which is the alarm is 12. But if I change this to 7 now, and if I run this code, now I'm gonna see the time is 7. And if I change this to, let's say, 13, and here we have no 13, the else part is gonna be executed, similar to our if then else statement. And we get the time is 13, so it was executed the else part now. And we can combine those expressions by putting a colon, and we can combine them and putting them on one single line. So I can put here colon, I can type here 7 and 14. Now, I'm gonna delete those two. Now, it will check to see if our alarm argument has the value either 12 or 7 or 14. So let's change it to 14 to see. So now if you run this code, you're gonna see that this will evaluate to true, and this code on the right is gonna be executed. So now again the time is 14. And if I change this to 7, again this will evaluate true because one of those expression is true. So again the time is 7. Alright. What you can do next is we can check to see if a number is in a certain range. So we can put another expression here, and here I can type in, and the in keyword is used to check to see if a number is in a certain range. And to declare a range, we type the range. Let's say that I want to check from let's say 1 from 1 to 10. We put 2 dots, dot 10. Now what this is gonna do is gonna check to see if our alarm argument, in this case our alarm variable, is in the range from 1 to 10. Now I'm gonna put a minus sign and a greater than sign to have the arrow, and here I'm gonna type the code that I want to be executed. In this case it's just a println statement, and I'm gonna type the number is in the range 1.7. Now if you run this, let's run it from here. We get the time is 7 because the first branch is checked and this branch is true, and in effect it executes the code on the right, and the next branches are left off, are not executed. To change that, let's put this first. So let's copy this. Now if you run this code, now get the number is in range 1 to 10, and it's true, our 7 is in the range from 1 to 10. What you can do is also you can use the logical NOT operator. So I can put here the logical NOT operator, which is an exclamation mark, and this now will negate this value. So if you run this code now, you'll get the output 7. The time is 7. So now you get the output. The time is 7 because this switches this value from true to false and executes this part. Now let's delete this. What we can also do is that we can put curly braces. So I can put curly braces, press enter, the same here, and here also. And it's recommended to use the curly braces only if you have multiple statements in your code. In our case, we have only one single statement, which is this println, which outputs some text to the console. And the when statement, as I said, can be used as an expression. So I can type here a val, let's say text, and I can assign the when expression to our text variable. Now we need to give back a value to our text. So instead of printing this text, I can delete this. Let's put it like this. Now the last expression in our block of code, which is now we have a single expression, but if we have multiple expressions, say that we have here another println, let's say some text. So similar to our if then else expression, the last line of code, the last expression, is gonna be assigned to our variable text. Now let's print this down here to our console. So let's type println, and let's put directly here text. Now if you run this code, now you're gonna see the text, the number is in the range 1 to 10, because it checks to see if this expression on the left is true. Then it executes the code inside the curly braces, which is this expression. And because now we're using the when as an expression, it assigns this expression, this text, or variable text. Then it outputs that value with the println down here in our console. So we get the number is in the range 1 to 10. All right. Now, but what if I want to put here a less than sign? So what if I want to put here if it's less than 7, our alarm argument? I can do that. The only way to do that is by, let's delete this now. Let's put 7, not here. Let's press Ctrl Alt L to format the code. Alright. Now, the only way to put a greater than sign or a less than sign or a greater than equal or greater or a less than equal sign is to delete the argument here. But let's first delete the curly braces to make things more clear. So let's delete the curly braces. Let's delete this now because here we have 2 lines of code, so we need to use curly braces. This is why I deleted the println there. And again, you should always use curly braces if you have multiple lines of code. But in our case, we have a simple line of code, which is the text on the right, which is going to be assigned to our variable text, and it's going to be output in the console. So always use curly braces if you have multiple lines of code. Alright, now this is more concise and more clear. And let's say that I want to check to see if our alarm is less than, say, 10. To do that, we need to delete the argument here. Alright. And now what can I do is I can put here our alarm variable, and here I can put less than or equal to 10. So now here we have a Boolean expression on the left. Sorry. So now we have a Boolean expression here on the left, and this will check to see if our alarm, our variable alarm has a value which is less than or equal to 10, which is true. We have a 7 here. So now if you run this code, but let's delete this because we need to have now Boolean expression here, because here we cannot, here we have just literal types. So here I need to put, let's say, if, let's type alarm equals 8, or 2 vertical bars, alarm equals 7. So now if you run this code, now you get the output, the number is in the range 1 to 10, because now this on the this expression on the left is true, and it executes this text. It assigns this expression to our variable text, and it prints down here that value. So you get here the number is in the range 1 to 10. But this condition is also true. So if I swap those two, so if I put this one below, because as I said, if one of the expression evaluates to true, the next ones, the ones which are below, so this, in this case this one is true, are not going to be executed, are skipped. It only executes this code, and the subsequent ones are omitted. So let's put this below. It's good to remember this. So now if you run this code, now get the time is 7, because now this evaluates true, even though this below is also true, because our alarm is less than 7, but because this evaluates to true, it executes the code which is on the right, which is assigning this expression to our text, and then it leaves the when expression. It's not going down to execute the next one. So it breaks right there, and it stops right there, and it's not executing the next branch. So this is our discussion about the when statement and the when expression. See you in the next video. Now it's time to start a discussion about nullability in Kotlin, but first I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call it null. Make sure to have the language Kotlin selected, and for the build system IntelliJ. Also make sure to have the JDK selected here, and I'm gonna check this little box to generate the main function for us, and that code that comes with the main function. So I'm gonna click on create to create a new project. Now our project is gonna be created in a short moment. So we got our project created, and we got our main function auto generated here for us because we checked that box. So I'm gonna delete this because I don't need this code. And I'm gonna hide the project pane. So what is a null value? A null value is basically when you assign to a variable nothing. Syntactically speaking, you assign null to it, but what that means is that you have a variable which has no value, which has no memory reference. And if you try to do some arithmetic operation with that variable, you will get in an impossible scenario where you have nothing try to do some work, and that will throw a null pointer exception. And this is particularly bad because the null pointer exceptions are only thrown at runtime and not at compile time. So you could have your program working well and having no problems, and at some point you try to, I don't know, press a button, and somehow that pressing of the button is using that variable which has a null value, and then it's gonna throw a null pointer exception, and your app will crash. And Kotlin aims to avoid and to eliminate null pointer exceptions and null values. That is not to say that we can't have a null value in Kotlin, but it's very hard to have one. So let's see why. So what Kotlin has done to make null values and implicitly null pointer exceptions very hard to get, it first made all its types by default non-nullable, and that means that you cannot assign null to it. So if I declare here a variable called text, I'm gonna declare the type explicitly, so it's gonna be a string. And if I assign null, so to assign null to a variable, just type the null, and we have the null keyword. We can't, because this variable by default and all the variables by default are non-nullable, and that means that you cannot assign a value. So if I hover over this underline, it says null cannot be a value of a non-null type string. But what if I want to assign null to it? What if I want to have null for some reason? In that case, you go at the end of the type and you put question mark, and that means that now you have a nullable type. That means that you can assign null to this variable. So if I put question mark here, now I can assign null to this variable. So this is how we can assign null to a variable, by putting the question mark at the end of the type, because that is saying to the compiler, hey, I'm gonna let me to assign null to this variable. So to avoid that underline in red. Now, if I try to print this, so if I put here print line, and I put here text, what do you think we'll get in the output? And the output to get null, you don't get null pointer exception. So now if I hide this, and let's say that I want to get the length of, let's say, of the text. So let's say that I assign here some text. Well, actually, let's put a name here, name. And if I try to get the length here, so if I put here dot length, I have an underline which says only safe, and we have this question mark dot on non-null or asserted, and we have this this operator. Calls are allowed on a nullable receiver of type string. So it's saying that we can only get, because this variable can have a null value, but we know that it doesn't. But the compiler is saying to us, because we said that this can have null, is saying to check first that this variable is not equal to null, and then try to get its length. And let's do that in the long way first. So let's delete this. So let's actually just copy this. And we type if, we put parentheses, if text not equal to null, then we're gonna output its, then we're gonna get its length. So we're gonna type here text dot length. So now the compiler is happy because it's ensured that it's not gonna have null, because we checked here especially that this variable should have it should not have null in order to get the length. So now if I run this, I get 4. So this is the length. So we have 4 letters here, and I can also add the else part, which is gonna say the variable is null. So if the variable is null, the else part is gonna be called. So now if you run this, we'll get also 4, but I'm gonna reassign this variable. So I'm gonna change it to var first. So we put here var, and put here text equals null. So now our variable is null, and this check is gonna fail, and it's gonna execute the else part. So if I run this code, so we get the variable is null, because now on the third line we assign null to it. So this if fails, and it executed the else part. But as you can see, it's a lot of code just to check to check. And imagine if you have multiple variables to check, to always check for this that the variable is not null, then print its length. And there is a shorter way in Kotlin to do that, and we saw as a suggestion how to do that previously. So if I press Ctrl Z to undo our code, so if I still pressing, now if I hover over this error that we had previously, which says only save call, so and you have this operator, and this is called the save call operator. And if I put here just a question mark, this is equivalent to having a if, which is checking to see if the length is null, and if the length is null, then it's gonna say null, and if it's not null, it's gonna just output 4. So now if I run this, so this is equivalent to the if the if statement that we had previously. So we have 4. So but if I assign null, so if I type here, let's change it to var first. So if I assign here text equals null, we'll simply get null. We get null. But what if I want to get that null pointer exception for whatever reason? What can I do? Also, the compiler is helping us also there. So because if I delete that save call operator, which is just a question mark dot, and that is basically saying, hey, if this text is not null, then output in the console, then get the length, and then output that in the console. If it's null, just say null. So this is how the save call operator works. But if I delete this, as you can see, there is another operator, and is this operator, which is 2 exclamation marks. And this operator is basically saying, hey, if this variable has null, then throw that exception, but if it's not null, just output the length. So if I put 2 exclamation marks here, but for whatever reason it's not our text dot length is not getting the length, and I think this is because we assign to our text variable here null. It has a problem with inferring what type this variable is, even though here is saying that it's a string, so we should be able to call that length. And to avoid this, you just put null at when we declare the variable. So we assign here null. So we put here null. Now if you run this, because you have the 2 exclamation mark operator, now this will throw that null pointer exception that I talked about. So we get exception in thread main, so it doesn't matter what thread main is now for now. You get java.lang the null pointer exception. So this is the null pointer exception. But if we assign down here this variable text equals some text, and now if we run this code, you get 9 because this is the length of this. So this is how you can use this operator. The next operator that you can use is the else operator. And to show you how that works, I'm gonna delete this code. Now I'm gonna declare another variable up here. So I'm gonna call it text2. We put equals and we type text. Now to use the else operator, we put a question mark and a colon. And now we need to type something on the right of the else operator. So we put here some text. I'm going to explain immediately how this works. So I'm going to type here some text. Now what the else operator is doing is saying if this variable text is null, then assign what is on the right to this variable text2. If this variable text is not null, then assign what is to this variable to our variable text text2. And now let's type here text2 and let's delete the length. So now if you run this code, let's actually put something more discrete, like the variable is null. So if you run this code now, we get the variable is null because it checked to see if this variable on the left is null, and if it is null, it's gonna it assign this to a variable text2, and then we output that in the console. But if this is not null, then it's gonna assign what is on this, whatever value this variable has to our variable text2. So if now I put here text equals this variable is not null. Now if I run this, now this will evaluate to true, so it's gonna assign whatever value is on the left to our variable text to our variable text2, and I'm gonna see in the output the variable is not null. So when a variable text2 has now the value assigned for this variable. So this is the shorter way of writing. Let me show you how we will write this in the longer way. So in the longer way you will have something like this. So let's delete this code. Actually, yeah, let's delete this code. We'll have a variable called text2, and it's gonna have an empty string. So what we would have to do without the else operator, we have to first check if text not equal to is not equal to null. Then we're gonna call our variable text2, and we're gonna assign text to it. Else we're gonna assign to our text2 variable the text this variable is null. So this is the longer way we're doing of what we did previously. So if I press Ctrl+L to format the code, now if you run this, you will see the same output. The variable is not null. So we get the variable is not null, and this is the longer way of doing the same thing. So if I assign here, if I delete this, and the variable will have null. Let's press Ctrl Z. If I run this, now the else part is executed, so our variable text2, it will have this variable is null, the text assigned to it, and then it's gonna output that in the console. So this is the longer way of doing what we had previously. So if I press Ctrl Z to have the Elvis operator back, so that was the longer way of doing what we're doing here in one simple line of code. So this is our discussion about nullable types, and I hope that you got a lot from this video, and see you in the next video. Right, now it's time to start a discussion about functions, but first let's create a new project, and I'm gonna speed up the process now a little bit because we already did this a few times. So I'm gonna call it functions, should be in Pascal case. Select IntelliJ, click on next and click finish. Alright, let's delete the code inside the curly braces. Let's hide the project pane. And let's start by saying that until now we have written our code only inside the main function, and occasionally we have called the println function to output some code to the console. But as I said at the beginning of our videos, you can create your own functions in Kotlin. So let's see how we can do that. So go down here at the end of our main function, at the end of our enclosing curly brace, and to declare a function we type the keyword fun. We put space. Next we need to give a name to our function, and the name of the function should say what the function is doing, and generally it's a verb. I'm gonna call this function say hello, and it should be in camel case. Next we put parentheses because functions can take input to work with it, and next we put curly braces because this is where we're gonna put our instructions for our statements. This is gonna put our logic. Now let's add the println statement here. Let's type the text hello, and now let's run this code. Now, as the input, we don't see nothing here because if you hover over this say hello function, it says function say hello is never used, because in order for this function to be used, you need to call it from main function, and to call it from main function we type here the name of the function. You can type it entirely or you can start typing, and IntelliJ is gonna give you some suggestions. So press enter to fill in that for you, and also press Ctrl Alt L to format the code. Now let's run our code. Now you're gonna see that it says in the output hello, because the main function executes what's inside the curly braces, and on the line 2 it sees that we have a function that we're calling here a function. It executes the say hello function, the code inside the say hello function. In this case is a simple println statement, and then it outputs that to the console, and it exits the code. It finishes the process because we don't have anything else below for say hello. But what we can do is put another say hello here to call our function again, and now we're gonna see the output hello 2 times, because now we're calling the say hello function first on the line 2 and second on the line 3, so it will be executed 2 times. So you can see that in this way functions are reusable, and are separate chunks of code which can be reused, and you'll see that they can be reused in specific cases. Now, as I said, functions can take input, and to make a function to receive some input, we need to define what is called a parameter. And to define a parameter, we type the name of the variable first. I'm gonna call it name, and we need to explicitly provide a type here. So for the type, I'm going to choose string. And we need to explicitly provide the type here, because there is no way for the type to be inferred here, because the value that you're going to pass to this say hello function is going to be here. So it's impossible to know to what kind of value we're going to pass to it. So this is why you need to explicitly say what data this parameter or this variable is going to store. So let's delete this second say hello. Now let's change the text that we have here in the println. Let's refer the parameter name. So put a $sign and start typing name. And you can see that it has this P for parameter, and press enter. Now, what is going to happen now is that this say hello function is going to be called, is going to be executed from our main function. And the code inside the say hello function is also going to be executed, and specifically is going to execute this text that we type here to be outputted. It's going to execute the hello, and then it's going to execute what value if we have passed as an argument for this parameter. And if you don't know what an argument is, the argument is the value that you pass to the function. So in this case, up here we need to pass some text. So I'm gonna put a name here, not here. It should be in double quotation marks, and we see that we have a hint here which says the name of the name of the parameter, which is name. Now what is going to happen now is this say hello function is going to be called, and this value that we passed here is going to be used in our println statement where we're referring now, which is here we're using the name. And it's going to use that value, and that value is going to be outputted down here. And let's run the code to see. Now get hello Alex, because now it's using the value that we pass here as an argument to the parameter name, and it's using that value down here where we type the println statement or function. Now functions can take multiple arguments, and to do that we need to define, I should say that you can define more parameters for the function, and a function can take multiple arguments. And to define another parameter, we put a comma here, and we type the name of our parameter. It's gonna be age, and we need to provide a type, and I'm gonna provide the type as an integer, because it's gonna store whole numbers. And here we're gonna put an exclamation mark, and I'm gonna type your age is. Now we need to refer the parameter age, and also need to provide the value for that parameter. Now if you go up here, now it says that you need to provide a value for the parameter has age. It says no value passed for the parameter age. So here you need to type a value for our parameter that we define. So let's say 22. Alright, now if you run this code, now those parameters that we define here are gonna use the values, the arguments that we type here inside our curly braces, or how it's often called, the body of the function or the code block. So it's gonna use the values here and here. Now another important thing to know is that you cannot change the value of a parameter. So if you type here age equals, let's say 30, now if you hover over here, because you have an underline, it says val cannot be reassigned, because those parameters are declared as vals, as variable vals. So that means that they are immutable. You cannot change their values. The only way to use a variable which can have his value change is to declare one. So if you declare here a variable, I'm going to declare it as a var to change its value. I'm going to call it number, and if I assigning here a value of 50. Now, as you know, you can change now his value to, let's say, 70. And you can also assign the parameter here to our variable number. And now we can change his value. Also, you can put number and you can put another value here. Alright. Another important thing to know is that this variable that we define here, also the parameters, are scoped inside the function say hello. In other words, they cannot be referred or accessed outside of the curly braces of the say hello function. So if I try to access that number variable here, it's not working. If I try to access here on the main function, let's say type number, I can't, because it's scoped inside the say hello function. It exists only inside the say hello function. The same thing with the parameters, age or name. So in this way, you can see that functions can be very useful because they are chunks of code which are reusable and flexible. And to see an example with this, let's declare another function down here. Let's call it let's type the fun keyword. Let's call it get data. And this function is gonna mimic a real function in a real app, which can get some data from the internet. Of course, that we're not gonna get some data from the internet, but we're gonna mimic that behavior. So here I'm gonna define a parameter. Let's call it data, and for the type, let's choose string. Right? Let's put the curly braces, and here let's add the print ln statements. And here we're gonna print your data is, and I'm gonna refer the parameter data. Alright, now what I can do up here is to define a boolean variable. It's gonna be a val. I'm gonna call it has internet connection. I'm gonna assign a value of true to it. Now I can put an if statement here. Now I can check to see if that expression is true. So I can put equals true, or use the shortcut because it's better. Here I'm gonna put the curly braces. Now I'm gonna call the get data function only if this condition is true. So in our case it's true, but in a real app that can be false. So in that case you can do something else. As you're gonna see, let's also add the else part here. And here we're gonna call another function which is gonna be called in the case that there is no internet connection. Alright? So above here you can put some logic to get the data from the internet, but because this is a simple example, we're gonna type here directly some text. Let's put some data, and for the else part, in the case that there is no internet connection, that variable is false, we can declare another function down here and I'm gonna call it fun show message. And this is not gonna have any parameters. It's gonna have only simple println statement, and it's gonna say that there is no internet connection. Alright, so now let's go up here now, and now you're gonna call the show message function in the else part. Now if you run this code, you're gonna see hello Alex, which is our first function up here on the line 2. Your age is 22, and next to see your data is some data, because it executes the say hello function, then it declares this variable, and it checks it checks to see if this condition is true and this condition is true, and it executes this function, get data. So this is why you get your data is some data. But if for whatever reason the user has no internet connection, let's say you assign a value of false to it, to this, now this function is going to be called show message. So this function show message now is called, and the code inside the show message function is called, which is println, with this println statement which says there is no internet connection. In a real app you can have some logic to show dialogue that there is no internet connection. And you can see that in this way with functions you can divide your code in different chunks of different chunks of code, which can be called in very specific cases. So in this case we only call our functions only in the case that we have internet connection, or in the case that we don't have internet connection. So in this way we have divided our code in different chunks of code, which can be called in different specific scenarios. And in this way we can write a program, because if you just put your code, all of your code in the main function, and you execute that code from top to bottom, you cannot create a program like that. So this was an additional discussion with the get data and show message, and I hope that I not confused you a lot. So see you in the next video. Alright, so in the last video we've seen how we can create functions, how we can call our functions, how we can define parameters to our functions, how we can send data to our function as arguments. Now it's time to see how we can return some data from a function. But let's first read the code that we have here to make things more clear. And the code inside the function, the main function. Alright, now let's define another function. I'm going to type the fun keyword, space, and it's going to be called getMax. And this function is going to return the maximum of 2 integers. So I'm going to define here a parameter. I'm going to call it a. In a real app you should use more descriptive names. It's going to be of type int, and the next one is going to be called b, and it's going to be also of type int. I'm going to put the curly braces and I'm going to press enter. Now, to get the maximum value between these two numbers, we type here val max, and here we type an if expression. So we type if a greater than b, then we're going to assign a to our max variable, else we're going to assign b, and in the case that the two numbers are equal, b is going to be assigned to our max variable. Now, in order to return this value to our function, we need first to say to the function what kind of data is going to return. And to do that, we go here at the enclosing parentheses, and if you don't have spaces here, or you wondering about how to have the proper formatting, you just press Ctrl Alt L and the code is going to be formatted. Alright, and here we put a colon, and here we define what type of data this function is going to return, and in this case it's going to be an integer, so we put int here. And this is similar to the way we declare a type for a variable. Now, if you go down here, now you see that it says a return expression is required in a function to block body. So now we need to return this. Now we need to return some data that we define here. In this case, we need to return an integer. And to return the maximum value to our function, we type here return, the keyword return, and our value, which is our variable max, and press enter. Now, if you call this function in our main function, get max, Now let's also press Ctrl Alt L to format the code. And here we let's say that we type 2 arguments for our parameters. Let's say that we put 5 and 9. Now if you run this code, now you're gonna see in the output nothing, because in order to get this value, you need to retain this value, to capture this value in a variable. And to do that, we define a variable in front of our getMax function. It's also be a val. I'm gonna call it max, and we're gonna assign the getMax function to our variable, and that is gonna return our maximum number. Now you may see here that you have 2 names. We have the same name here and the same name, and that is not a problem, because this variable max that we have inside the getMax function exists only inside the getMax function. It's scoped only here. This is why you can use the same name here. So if I try to type here also max to declare the variable which is going to be called max, I can't, because it says completed declaration, because the compiler doesn't know, if you assign a value, let's say, to this, it will not know what variable to call, because you have the same name. But up here is not a problem, because this is in the block of the main function, so it exists only here, and this exists only here. Now we have called our getMax function, and this function is going to return the maximum of these 2 values, which is 9. Now we need to print this value in our console, and to print this value, you just type here println, and we're referring our max variable. Now if you run this code, you're gonna get 9, because our getMax function is called, the two arguments are passed to our function, then the code inside our getMax function, it's executed, it compares these two numbers, and if a is greater than b, then it assigns a to our max variable, or it's gonna, if that is not true, it's gonna assign the value of b, and then it returns that max value to the function which is called. So this function returns that value here, and here we capture that value which is returned from the getMax function in our max variable, and then we print that max variable with our println function or statement, and then we see the output in our console 9. Right? Another important thing to know is that after we type the return call or the return keyword, the function is lived. The function is stopped there. So if we add other text here, let's say we add here a println, and we type here some text, you see that this is highlighted, and it says that this is a reachable code, because after we typed our return max, our function is stopped, is lived, and it's not executing any code below of that return call or of that return keyword, right? Another important thing that you can do with return keyword is that you can return from a function without returning any kind of value, and in that case it will have the same effect, and that means that it will leave the function right there, even though we don't return any kind of value. So I can type here return, but let's delete here the type, because now it's expecting a value to be returned, and now this will have the same effect. It will leave the function right there, and it will not execute any line of code below of our return keyword. So if I type here a println statement, and I put some text here, as you can see, this has the same effect. If you type the return keyword in your function, it will stop the execution of the function, and every line of code below of the return keyword is not going to be executed. So it's very good to know this also. Another important thing to know is that we can only return a single value with the return keyword. So we cannot return here two integers, let's say. And also we cannot have two returns in the same function. Let's say if I put here also return max. I can't, because this is also unreachable code. But I can have two returns calls if they are reaching different branches. So if I change this if expression to an if statement, so if I type something like this, if let's say a greater than b, let's add the curly braces now. We type here return a, else return b. So now we have two returns, but they are never reached together. They are always reached separately. So this is why you can use here two returns, because as I said, they are reached always separately. So if you run this code, you're gonna see the same output. So you see 9. So this is another way to write the same thing that we had previously. But it's recommended to use what we had previously, because with specifically is better to have an if expression. Another way to write the same thing but in a more concise way, and let's undo the code that we have that we had previously. So let's press Ctrl Z. So now I have the code that we had previously. Now if you hover over this max, it says variable used only in formatting return can be in line. So if you click here in line variable, now this thing does the same thing that it was doing previously, but this is a shorter way to write the same thing. So now it returns A if this condition is true. Otherwise, the else part is called and it returns B. So we have the same thing, but written in a shorter way. Alright, another way to write the same thing that we have here is by using what is called the single expression function. And to do that, we can remove the curly braces. We can put our code up here. We can remove the first curly brace, and we can also remove the return keyword. And here we put equals. And this now does the same thing that the previous code was doing, but this is a more concise way. And it's recommended to use this only if you know that you have in your function a single expression, or in other words, if you know that you have a single line of code. And you can also remove the type here, because the type can be inferred. And again, only use this if you know that you have in your function a single line of code, and in that case you can skip the return keyword. But if you have multiple lines of code, you should always use the curly braces and the return call or the return keyword. Alright, so this is our discussion about how we can return a value from a function. Alright, so now let's continue our discussion about functions, and now it's time to look at what is called function overloading. And let's say that I want here to pass not two integer types, but two doubles to be compared. So let's say that I type here 6.5 and 9.5.